All right, there is a new book out, and Paul Rayburn is the author. PaulRayburn.com. His new book out is Do Fathers Matter? What Science is Telling Us About the Parent We've Overlooked. This just days before Father's Day. Paul Rayburn, welcome, Big 550 KTRS.
Hi, glad to be here.
I didn't know people were overlooking dads.
You didn't know people overlook dads?
Yeah.
They do.
Well, you have to watch some of these diaper commercials that say, we're going to put our diapers really to the test. We'll see if dads can put them on, There's a whole series of things, I think, in our culture that suggest that dads are inept or incompetent or somehow not up to the job. So that's turns out to be wrong. Would you believe it?
Well, all stereotypes are based in truth. So why is that so wrong?
Well, I think, go back a generation or so to when mothers were home, fathers were working full-time or maybe more than full-time, and mothers took care of the kids. So I guess in that era, fathers might not have changed as many diapers and they might have been a little bit more awkward. But those days are long gone, as we all know. We now live in a world where in many, many families, both parents work. Sometimes mothers are the principal wage earner, and fathers and mothers tend to pass children back and forth. We've got all kinds of complicated child care situations we set up. And so fathers are, of necessity, often spending more time with the kids. And not only do they take care of the household chores better than some of our myths might suggest, but they also make all kinds of important, biological and genetic and social contributions to their children that is all new research that we haven't known about before.
The man and the father is much more apt to leave the family than the mother, right? There are many more single mothers out there than there are single fathers out there. Would you agree?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. I mean, partly it's, there are probably factors we can't change about the way men and women are, but a lot of that is set up, through our courts and our courts and our social systems, and that's the way we've set that thing up. It also, I think, dates back to a time when fathers were the principal breadwinners or often the only breadwinners. In the case of divorce, fathers were working and mothers had the kids because fathers were working. Now, our families have changed and many fathers have more opportunity to spend with their kids. But, what happens to kids after divorce is changing much more slowly.
What about fathers and daughters as far as the importance of a young lady, a girl having a father in the family?
Well, yeah, that's a nice segue from talking about divorce and where fathers are absent. It turns out that when fathers are present and engaged, with their teenage daughters, those girls are much less likely to engage in risky sexual behavior, less likely to get pregnant at an early age, less likely to get involved with criminal justice system. When fathers are absent, all of those risks for teenage girls go up. And what's tragic about that is not only are there more single mothers than single fathers, but after divorce, depending on what statistics you look at, between a third of fathers and as many as a half of fathers, divorced fathers, either never see their children or almost never see their children. So those things that fathers can provide in terms of protective effects for their daughters, in many families the fathers just aren't there. And that's a lot of this research tells us that when fathers aren't there, that's a much worse thing than we might have thought.
I've heard women say this, and some studies bear this out, even numbers, and that is that the male is an endangered species. Women are going to college more. They're graduating law school more. There are more female doctors. The men are just sort of abdicating all of their responsibilities.
Well, I think you're right. There is some evidence to suggest that kind of thing. I think, to say that men are an endangered species is obviously a provocative way of raising some issues about how our society and our families are changing. So men aren't really an endangered species, but in the traditional model of the family where the father was the the wage earner, the breadwinner, there was a kind of a different kind of power relationship between mothers and fathers and families. Now that's equalized out in a lot of families because both parents are earning wages and involved in work outside the home. And so things are changing. So yes, what happens is that families change, the economy changes, and then the rest of society gradually catches up. So we're in that transition period now where I think it's difficult for a lot of families because mothers sometimes are going back to work when they'd rather not be doing that out of financial necessity. Many families, parents have trouble finding jobs at all because we still haven't completely recovered from the recession. So it's a tough time. And what I try to do in Do Fathers Matter is get together the research on what we know about fathers. So when we make the social decisions about families and government policies and all those kinds of things, we at least know what fathers do for their families, and we can make informed decisions as opposed to not knowing and just shooting in the dark.
What is science telling us now that fathers can do to help going forward?
Well, I would say, let's see, we talked about the teenage daughters. The language development is important with fathers. The fathers engage in a different kind of play than mothers do. I think a lot of us know this, that fathers tend to roughhouse more with their kids, but fathers engage in many different kinds of activities with kids, being more free form in terms of play. And it turns out not only is this important for kids to be happy when they're kids, but this makes, this correlates with adults being more at ease in social circumstances, being more competent, more successful at their jobs, and a whole range of things. So, even long after fathers are gone, they have these beneficial things that they've left their children. The flip side of that is, fathers who smoke, their kids are at risk of obesity throughout life on into middle age. Fathers who are obese, their kids are at risk of obesity. Fathers who are depressed either during their partner's pregnancy or after birth, those kids are at risk of depression. So again, not everything that fathers contribute is good, and those aren't all things they can do a lot about. But I think it's better that we know that and then make our decisions about, how we should treat families and how we want to live our lives as parents.
Really interesting stuff. Paul Rayburn is our guest. He's a writer for Psychology Today. His website is paulrayburn.com, and his book is Do Fathers Matter? What Science is Telling Us About the Parent We've Overlooked. Paul, thanks for checking in.
Thanks. It's been fun.
8:29, Big 550.